What's something you could not believe you had to explain to an adult? Story 1. No matter how much you might want to put a camo pattern on your walls, you, not the paint, have to determine what that pattern looks like, and you will also have to purchase multiple cans of paint, tinted differently because camo doesn't come out of the can that way. There's an ice cream store lady who posts about people having this problem with milkshakes. They'll get a multicolored ice cream as the flavor, then be upset that the colors are all mixed together. She specifically warns children and she's sympathetic to them, but she is rightfully baffled when an adult is sad that the colors all mix up. Having worked at an ice cream place and having been asked for rum raisin but without the rum by an adult, I feel her pain. I own 2 shops right next to each other, one of which is an ice cream store, and can confirm people turn into frickin' idiots when it comes to ice cream. What is that? They'll be perfectly normal in shop 1, then get to the ice cream and go, "I'll have a scoop of this flavor that you clearly don't offer at the moment. My toddler will have the obvious alcohol-flavored one that has a bottle of liquor on it as a decoration." What does your hazelnut taste like? And is there dairy in the yogurt-flavored ice cream? Because I can't have a dairy. There is? Too bad. I'll just have the cheesecake then. I've got a related story. I was working with a guy in Georgia and we were driving along on a gorgeous spring day, sunny with a few sparse high clouds. Suddenly, this guy pointed out the windshield at the forested hills in the distance and exclaimed, "Those hills look just like camouflage." The spring foliage and the ratio of sun to clouds had made a perfect camouflage pattern. This guy was amazed. I asked him, "Why do you think they call it camouflage?" Story 2. Volunteered in a charity shop. A lady came to the counter with a top and asked if I could look in the back for one of the same color but a larger size. Tried to explain that we don't do that because we're a charity shop. She insisted that other shops like H&M have done that for her. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Eventually, I just went in back for a few minutes, made a cup of tea for a coworker, and came out saying we didn't have any. She got mad at that too. Op shop, Australian for charity shop, we had a family come to shop and place a massive heap of clothing on the counter, which they carefully and with much discussion divided into 2. None of this discussion happened in English, so imagine our surprise when they said, "This one we will pay for and this one we will have for free." They did not have any of the vouchers the charity gives out for that sort of thing, and their free pile was all very expensive brands. That was a conversation I could not physically listen to. Very painful. Once when I was working in a thrift store, a woman found a skirt and a shirt with the same pattern. The skirt was, let's say, $5, and the shirt was $3. She was very adamant that the skirt should also be $3 because they were the same pattern. I said, "No, sorry, those are the prices." When she complained, I said maybe we should sell both items for $5 each instead. She didn't like that. Eventually she left. I don't remember if she bought the items or not. Very peculiar. I had one as a customer in a charity shop. Books were buy one, get one free, and I took 4 to the counter. The lad behind the counter took buy one, get one free very literally. Buy one, get one free. It didn't matter whether the rest of the purchase was 2 books or 10 books. You'd already had your one free. I genuinely don't know who was more confused by the interaction, me, him, or the manager who had to step in after we'd done 3 rounds of Baldric math, and the lad had finally agreed to put my 4 books through as 2 purchases, each with one free. Charity shops attract both the best and worst people. This weekend, an old Turkish dude was interested in buying some lighting, the type that had to be wired onto the switch. He wanted to test them. I, female, told him 3 times he couldn't. The coworker, also female, told him the same. He still tried to stick the wires directly into the outlet. The boss, male, had to yell at him to get him to stop. The guy went on a rant about how we were bad people, we didn't respect customers, etc. Boss ended up kicking him out of the store for being a dangerous dumbass and for disrespecting women. I worked at Trader Joe's and did ordering. I was in the fridge stocking things. A lady yelled back and asked if we had more sour cream. I told her we didn't. She asked if I could check in back. "Ma'am, I am literally in the back. I am in the fridge. We do not have any more sour cream." She asked a manager to check when she was checking out. He came back and asked me if we had sour cream because I was in the fridge and was ordering. Sometimes places just don't have the thing, but man, I can't check anymore in the back than already being in the fridge. My wife has worked in the Sue Ryder charity shops for 11 years. I showed her this story of, have you got this top in a different size? She simply smiled and said it happens all the time. She said that it is amazing that so many people just miss the point of charity shops. They just don't get that they are the ones who are supposed to be doing the giving. The volunteers quickly develop thick skins to the cries of too much or how much. What wusses these retail volunteers off are the peasants who return $1 items for their money back, and when there's the amount of heartless thievery that takes place. Nothing is immune to theft. The shop where she works had to stop the practice of allowing prospective purchasers from trying on clothes as so much of their donated brand/designer stock went missing. We have a subclass of people in this country for whom it is just impossible to explain anything comprising virtue or compassion. Story 3. My husband had to explain to a coworker that she couldn't take a train from the US to Europe. She insisted she had to because she didn't like to fly. My parents were in Florida, and when asked about their accents, said they were from England. Did you drive over? They, 70s couple in their 70s, also got picked up by the police for walking along the road where they were staying. The police were friendly and took them to a golf course and told them to just take a golf cart. Walking is not allowed. Not nearly as ridiculous, but a lot of foreigners simply cannot understand just how big countries like the US, Canada, and Australia truly are. In college, I had to explain to a foreign exchange student that a quick overnight trip to Yellowstone was not going to happen considering we were in the Southeast. I grew up watching Extreme Engineering on Discovery Channel. Seasons 2 and onwards were mostly real construction projects, but the first one was all science fiction silliness, like a transatlantic tunnel. The most plausible transatlantic trains would be a basically neurally buoyant submarine, but not underground, tunnel that sits far enough below the surface that waves don't matter to it, but absolutely nowhere near the bottom. Controlling buoyancy, flexion, and depth, with trains traveling through, would be incredible engineering challenges, but what I'm describing is the least impossible option, only costing a few tens of trillions of dollars or euros. If you tried a tunnel that completely floated like a very long pontoon, then you'd have boats needing to pass over it, which would be dicey and open to aggression. Also, 72 trillion euros later, the bad news is, when you arrive in Ireland, the closest land, our trains are absolute crap, and you have to sail or ferry to Europe. Story 4. I had to explain to my mom that my daughter was growing in my uterus and not my stomach, so the hot sauce on my burrito wasn't going to cause her skin burns. I also explained if she were growing in my stomach would certainly cause way worse burns than hot sauce. It was then that I understood why the school nurse had to explain to me in 5th grade why I kept bleeding through my pants every month at school, and not my mom. Being fair to the mom and laying a lot of the mind blows, this one actually has some cultural traction. Most people don't know this, but the female reproductive cycle was actually not taught at all to young girls or women when they were in schools like they are now. The earliest I was ever taught was in middle school, where girls were taken to a separate area and boys had another area, and female nurses and teachers basically explained to us that one day we would have a cycle and all the stuff with it. It's because back when most of them were kids, they never got it. Even in Western cultures, talking about this stuff was actually not proper, even among women to girls. So most of them went their entire lives believing various old wives' tales and urban legends and false truths because of it, like using a tampon would make you lose your V-card. Sitting on the same spot as a man with an X time would get you pregnant. Men could tell if you had your V-card or not. And because of that, most didn't know until they became pregnant, and were told what was going on by their doctors, how babies actually formed, where they formed, or anything. They just accepted that you bleed a couple of days a month. It's normal. There are also the parents who don't want their kids taking basic sex ed for some reason, so they file religious excuses with the school so the kids need to leave during the unit. I don't know why this is allowed. I believe religion shouldn't interfere with basic health, but it definitely doesn't help. Kids should have the right to basic education. Parents have the right to learn as well. It's never too late to learn new things. I was lucky enough that my mom and aunt gave me comprehensive sex ed and ensured I was taught it. I know many women who were not. I knew a girl growing up who believed that her period followed the moon cycle and she could only get pregnant if she was lactating. Her mother refused to let her take sex ed and called us all corrupted and wrong. Sometimes I wonder what happened to her. This reminds me of a conversation I had with my mom too. I started using a moon cup for my periods a few years ago, and I was explaining to her that you squeeze it together and put it inside your thing to a certain point where it opens up and creates a seal, and then catches the blood. Neat. And she asked me what if I needed to pee, and I had to explain to my actual mother, a woman in her 60s, that your pee doesn't come out of your vagina. It comes out of your urethra, which is in a different spot and is not affected by the moon cup. I've heard a few stories like this now about older women, and it really makes you realize how poorly educated women were about their own bodies back in the day. Gonna be honest, some teachers also didn't know what they were teaching, and maybe from generations with not much sex ed or culture. I couldn't believe my Indian coworker was not educated and was smiling until she gave birth. She had no idea what the pain level was going to be when she was giving birth to her first child. Her elder sisters all had to keep their mouths because of her mother's order. My roommate is Chinese and the smartest girl when it comes to numbers. It seems to me that this is how twins are made. Long story short, her teacher taught her wrong. Afterwards, we watched a bio video. Must have been outdated text from decades ago. Story 5. North is not whichever way you're facing. I once had to explain to a friend on the phone that giving me directions by telling me to just walk straight without knowing which way I was facing was not helpful. Neither is repeating straight. She was 22 at the time. I once dated a girl who was absolutely gorgeous but had the intelligence of a mouse pad. I once asked her who the first president was. She said George Bush. She then promptly corrected herself and said Lincoln. Dumbfounded, I looked at her and said, "What coast is North Carolina on?" She goes, "The North Coast? Good thing she's pretty." Story 6. That you have to have a printer to print things at home. Tech support. And I wish I was lying. I once overheard my supervisor on the phone with tech support. She couldn't find her document. No, she knew where it was saved on the network, and in fact, had it open on her computer at that moment. She had printed it and misplaced the printer copy, and she wanted the tech support rep to tell her where she put it. Not tech support, but I had to explain to someone that the internet she gets on her home computer and her phone is the same as the one she gets on her work computer. To the same lady, you can send an email to more than one contact at a time. Also, to the same lady, you can directly add a picture to a Word document. You don't have to open a new blank document, insert it in there, and then copy and paste it into your working document. I had a coworker who had 2 file cabinets filled to bursting. I found out she was printing every email from everyone in the company. She filed them under our names individually, then deleted them in Outlook. I offered to help, but nope, she had a system and she liked it. The person who replaced her kept their emails on the server. Reminds me of teaching someone to use the new software. She opens the login screen, waited, screen cap, opened Word, pasted, printed, and closed Word without saving. Then put in your username and password, wait, screen cap, open Word, paste, print, close Word. It was a content management system and it had about 10 to 15 fields for various data. She did that for every field. I asked why she didn't at least leave Word open, and no. Needless to say, she never actually was able to use the system at all. She forgot to screen cap the icon to get in. You can't make this up. It was kind of you to mentor her. In my late 50s, first family in the block to have a personal computer, early adopters, I used to set up internal networks. It used to be fun. One could break out a stack of books and go to work setting things up. A lot has changed. Used to enjoy doing my own auto maintenance. Anyhow, kindly help her out. If she was older, she, like myself, would have weathered through a lot of transitions, from manual ledgers/bookkeeping to data entry, and then every evolution of software you could imagine. Some things were cumbersome, writing code for business letter templates, and yet a lot of the newer software is really invasive, and, with the addition of AI, hallucinating. A lot of us tuned out a while ago and greatly appreciate personal tutorials, shortcuts, etc. I have a few friends in their 80s who I try to walk through updates. The internet used to be fun. It is now like a foamy sewer spill at the beach. It needs to be cleaned up. I'm on the younger side of 40. Grew up watching television, using a computer and phone, etc., but it never consumed my life, the way that these things do for people nowadays. Even my head is spinning at times, so I can't imagine what an absolute nightmare it could have been for people from my parents' generation. It has become a nuisance. It used to be more basic, user-friendly, and pretty easy to modify stuff. Now it all has one tiny tweak for copyrights. Everyone had to put their thumbprints everywhere. A smart developer would replicate a slow highway, circa the 1990s. Maybe it is already done. Tried to get on board with Linux, but fell away. There was a lot of charm before, is an amazing tool. Mr. Rogers said, let's make the good attractive. Good idea. The internet is so ugly and messy. Story 7. When I worked at a doctor's clinic, I had a lady on the phone wanting to book an appointment to have her flu shot. She specifically asked it to be a telephone appointment. I could not believe that I had to explain to her that we could not inject her through the phone. I used to manage an ENT and audiology department whilst COVID was all the rage. You would not believe how many very senior people I had to tell that no, our patient group of deaf people was not suitable for a telephone appointment. I know there are technical ways around this, like minicom, interpreters, etc. That is not what they were talking about. I had someone come through the drive-thru asking for their flu shot. He insisted he could just put his arm through. It was the pharmacist's husband and also a pharmacist. Totally messing/joking with me, but unfortunately it has happened. Crazily enough, Hudson County, New Jersey Health Department has a drive-thru vaccination facility. Pretty sure it was set up at the beginning of COVID, but you can get a variety of vaccines there now. It's in this massive garage facility with roll-up doors, and during the height of COVID, they would run 3 to 4 lanes. We just went for the booster, and they only had one lane open. You just pull in, turn your car off, and after all the questions, they just jab you through the open window. It's kind of awesome. Reminds me of when I took a phone call from an angry patient asking why they hadn't heard about their blood test results yet after a lot of looking on the system. In a very confused discussion, it transpired that they hadn't been to have any blood taken, but were still expecting to hear what the blood test results were. Sounds like dementia. My grandma, even during her early phase, said she saw a relative while on the phone and that she had gained so much weight. This was in the early 2000s, no FaceTime, and her town only had dial-up. Yet, she insisted she saw her while on the phone call. Someone asking for a vaccine over the phone sounds like dementia. That lady probably used to do a lot of shopping over the phone and she thought, might as well get this done over the phone. Even if she sounded sane while arguing about it, that's how a lot of dementia patients begin. Story 8. New Zealand. The country we were both born, raised, and living in is not in Europe. Edit, to answer most of your questions, her reasoning is that when she fills out forms and has to tick a box for her ethnicity, she ticks New Zealand, European. She thought that option was there because we are European, and therefore in Europe. I had to explain to her that it just means she is of European descent, that her ancestors lived in Europe. I also had to explain that not every New Zealander ticks that box. There are other ethnicities here too. That tops the friend I grew up with in the US who said she couldn't go to Hawaii because she didn't have a passport. I explained she didn't need one because Hawaii is a state and part of the US, but she insisted it was its own country because it wasn't connected to the US. At that point, I just gave up and hung my head at the fact that we attended the same high school. I had a similar but kind of opposite argument with my cousin. She was insisting that Hawaii wasn't a Pacific island, or rather, a group of Pacific islands because it's part of the USA. I was trying to explain to her that despite politically being part of the country of the USA, geographically it is a group of islands in the Pacific Ocean, and that is the definition of a Pacific island. Her response to that was, well, when I think of Pacific islands, I think of places like Samoa and Rarotonga, therefore Hawaii isn't a Pacific island. This reminds me of when I lived in New Mexico in 2001 and 2002. Several different people told me that they had problems with ordering stuff over the phone. This was before Amazon and online ordering got so popular. More than one of them had been told, I'm sorry, we do not ship out of the country. New Mexico is a state within the United States. It is not out of the country, just for those readers in other countries. Story 9. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and Italy is not a town in France. Same guy. My sister dated him for far too long. My second oldest sister used to firmly believe that Abraham Lincoln was the 5th president because he was on the $5 bill, which made sense to her due to George Washington being the first, and he was on the $1 bill. But the funniest part to me was the fact that she believed Benjamin Franklin to be the 100th president, the reasoning being the same as the two previous. This reminds me of a man I was online friends with. He's in his 50s, who thinks an obviously photoshopped picture was real. He showed me it, and I just didn't have the heart to tell him it's not real. I still vaguely remember that picture. It was a seemingly homeless man with a bird and some other animals. My wife's cousin's boyfriend was also this level of stupid. He was Macedonian, living in Austria, was a hardcore fan of Manchester United Football Club, and thought that the city of Manchester, UK, was in the city of London, UK, and that both of which were in the city of Dublin, Ireland, despite having visited Manchester several times. It blew his tiny mind when I explained that all three were completely different places, hundreds of miles apart, and spread over 2 different countries. If it makes you feel any better, my oldest sister and BIL told a friend of theirs that all the old pictures in black and white are like that because back then everything was black and white. It wasn't just the filmmaking black and white photos, everything was black and white back then. So when/how did color just magically appear in the universe, lol? I can't believe 2 people in their 40s at the time believed that. To make it worse, they made fun of their friend for not knowing that, implying they were really stupid because everyone should have known that. Story 10. I worked in tech support for an internet provider a few years back. A woman calls in complaining her Wi-Fi isn't working. Go through the normal troubleshooting questions. What's your device? How are you connected? And finally, what can you see on your screen? Crazy woman. It's black. Me. How do you mean? Are you getting errors? The whole screen is black. Have you turned the laptop on? I can't. Why not? I've lost the charging cable. Okay, do you have another device I can help you connect with? Maybe a tablet or your phone? No, you need to get the laptop reconnected. Can you go and buy another charging cable? No, you need to send me one. We don't supply them. Also, we didn't supply you with your laptop, we just provide internet. Yes, and now you're not providing me internet, so you need to fix it. 40 minutes this went on as my team around me started in incoherent disbelief that this woman couldn't understand why her internet provider couldn't connect Wi-Fi to a computer with no power. I remember hanging up the phone and putting myself on break. My manager looked at me and told me to take a walk while barely hiding her unrestrained giggles. Having worked at an IT help desk, the first question we always asked was, is your laptop, desktop, or printer powered on? Which usually made them mad. Many times it was not on. People who don't hate making phone calls baffle me. If I'm having tech issues, you'd best believe that I'm restarting everything at least 5 times, unplugging and replugging every single cord a few times, reinstalling drivers, Googling the hell out of everything, and repeating the process for at least 3 days before calling anyone. And I'm usually just calling my dad because he works as an IT director. Then there's my husband who calls about the internet 5 minutes after it goes out instead of waiting a bit to see if it fixes itself. My husband was adopted. Apparently, you are married to his long-lost brother. I will do everything I can think of, Google or winkle out my nephew before I engage in the exercise in self-flagellation that is called tech support. 3 minutes into an outage, or anything that would occur when I was out of contact, he called tech support. He loved to call IT tech, Dish TV support, and the Geico insurance help, etc. He almost died 3 years ago, and one of the many reasons I miss him is that my phone guy is gone. I really could have used him after he died for the 1,947.5 phone calls that must be made when someone dies, retired military to boot. And I'm still a little salty about that, and he knows it, I'm sure. I am no longer in tech, but I spent 20 years doing everything from help desk to sysadmin to DBA. I've worked on AS400 systems and NT servers and managed HL7 interfaces for nearly 100 hospital systems in 4 countries. I will never forget Eileen from Wisconsin. I was managing a help desk for an international transcription service. She called late one night complaining about her connection dropping off frequently. So I started the rundown of checking our systems and her sessions. Turns out she was being disconnected by our beacon. Screw you, Oracle. Essentially, if your session is offline when the beacon fires every 60 seconds, you get locked out and have to log back in. Eventually, we got down to her ISP service being unstable, and I had to ask if she was using dial-up, preferred at the time, or broadband like cable or satellite. She kept telling me she had wireless. I was thinking she meant Wi-Fi, and asked if she could connect her PC to Ethernet to test. She tells me she is connected to Ethernet. But I thought you were using wireless. She says, yes, my internet is wireless. She had a radio internet provider and lived in BFE in the middle of a snowstorm. Her receiver was swaying in a blizzard and kept losing line of sight. It took over an hour to get her and her husband to understand that this has nothing to do with our systems. It had everything to do with them living miles from the nearest city and expecting reliable internet service in 2006. I have a good friend who runs her own IT business on Manhattan's Upper East Side. She charges $150 to $200 an hour because she has the patience of a computer saint. Half her conversations are like the above, and they often end with a simple line I gave her after hearing way too many of these phone calls. That's not how computers, the internet, your Wi-Fi works. Period. Because there is no explaining the reasons to people who won't listen. Then she goes to their homes to fix the charging cable / turn their computer or power strip on or reboot their computer and makes another $200. I worked tech support for Spectrum for about 2 months. 2 months training, 2 on the phones. Not even 3 weeks into being let loose on the phones, a lady calls and says she can't open her garage. I ask what she means and she says there's no power. Everyone in a mile radius has no power because of a power outage. Before I could say anything else, she said her AC unit was out, her boss had to order her an Uber, she couldn't pick up her kids, she had to get groceries, etc., etc. When she finished, I said, "Okay, we're not a power company, ma'am, we just provide the internet." She says, "Yeah, and my garage won't open," and goes through the whole tirade again. Finally explained to her if there's a power outage, she has to call the power company if she wants whatever information. She told me to get the number for her. Eventually, I just Googled her zip code and found a power company that seemed to be there and gave it to her, and then she got mad I didn't call her and found out what was going on. I had to take 5 after that one. I worked retail for 5 years and didn't have a tenth of the wild stories I got from working in that call center for just 2 months. No frickin' clue how people do that for an entire career. Honestly, I seriously doubt many are still around with a customer-facing ISP tech support job long term. Most either eventually are promoted to a more senior back office role that doesn't directly work with customers, like network engineering, or leave for something else, whether in IT or something entirely different. Especially Tier 1 jobs deal with a ton of technically inept customers who haven't even done basic troubleshooting to verify if it isn't their equipment before calling support. Story 11. When you save a file on Windows, the save window actually lets you save the file into a particular folder. You don't have to go into your recent items to find them and then move them to where you want them to be saved. This person had been working an office job at a computer for more than 5 years at that point. I once taught someone who had been typing on computers for several decades that you can hold Shift plus the letter to get a capital letter, and that you don't have to turn the caps lock on and off at the beginning of each sentence. I have a coworker who, through a normal conversation, stated she hates hitting the Shift plus any key, much less a letter key, and uses the caps lock anytime she needs a capital letter. She also hates typing from the home keys despite having formal training and such, and would rather copy and paste as much as possible. By no means is she stupid, but she's not very open-minded either. I suggested an easy solution for something that she was complaining about, and her response was basically, "Yeah, I know I can do it that way, but I would have to change how I do things." During my first week working as an admin assistant back in 2014, the person training me, I was replacing her and she moved up to being the admin for the CEO, was over my shoulder walking me through stuff. She said, "All right, now copy and paste that into the calendar." Oh wow, you already know how to Control-C and Control-V? That was the best job. She had made her own life so difficult by not understanding basic computer functions that within about a week, I had automated most of my work, and would only have to put in half an hour to an hour a day, and would spend the rest of my time in my cubicle reading ebooks. Luckily, I was the admin for a department of site inspectors, so they were almost never in the office, and my boss was the only one in office a few hours a week. The honest thing to do would have been to ask for more work to do, but I had so little work already that I was pretty sure my hours would just end up being cut. Story 12. I had to explain to my 2 coworkers that it wasn't some magic fairy that was throwing away their coffee cups. They were joking around one day that their old coffee cups always just disappear by the next day, and I had to tell them it was me, and that I had to start doing it because they kept getting left in the way and being knocked over. I was off for a few days and came back and there were cups everywhere. My place is like this. Our team is all very clean and tidy. I worked with them for years with 0 issues. They opened a new ward up and their staff are feral. We had to padlock one of the fridges and say this is our fridge, as the new ward staff kept leaving food for weeks until it went all moldy and eventually one of our ward staff would get pissed and throw it away. And it wasn't one staff member, it was like 12 of them doing that BS. They spilled milk in their fridge and they left it there for 3 months. This was despite 3 official meetings asking the person who spilled the milk to please clean it up because everyone was complaining and the cleaners outright refused to clean it because the person who spilled it should have cleaned it there and then. We've also had to lock out cupboards because their ward would steal all of our mugs. Honestly, I just don't get how some people can be so feral, and these are supposed to be highly educated people. Jesus, I worked with a guy years ago who would leave trash and crumbs all over the break room. Myself and another manager had to do a sit-down with him about correcting it. This grown man, in all sincerity, angrily pleaded with us that it only takes 5 seconds to clean his messes up. Like we were the dicks for not taking a simple 5 seconds to willingly clean up his mess. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.